All right, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. And we've got a lot to talk about. We have to talk about the Oscars that were last weekend, which were pretty enjoyable, I think. Yeah, free of the controversy of last year, obviously. And there were a lot of great wins we're talking about there as well. So we'll get around to that. But first, we got to cover new movies we got to talk about on stream. We have to review Scream 6, the latest entry in the Scream saga, which just came out last weekend. We'll have an early review of John Wick Chapter 4, which is actually coming out not this weekend, but next weekend. So you're getting an extra early review here for when that comes out next week. And then we will also be talking about a film that I've been wanting to get around for talking about for a while. We're going to talk about EO, which was nominated for the Academy Award for Best International Film. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll also talk about another one I wanted to talk about for a little bit is Aqua Teen Hunger Forever Plantasm. It's just one of those ones that I've wanted to talk about for a while. Like, obviously we got to talk about the other ones like Scream and John Wick, but I kind of like to talk about films that just I want to get out there. So if you want to read any of the reviews of the stuff I'm talking about here, you can read them on some of the websites that I've listed here. Although actually I should probably add Film Chop. I actually write a lot more for. So if you want to check out everything that I write, Film Chop would be the place to go. I also have a Patreon where I'm currently working on. I not only post just audio of the other videos I do, but also the books I'm writing currently. So there's a lot of early, not quite early, but upcoming stuff that I'm writing for some new books. So if you'd like to support the stream and my writing and books, there's a Patreon link, which I don't believe is on this video, and I need to get on that, but you can find it in other videos. So, all right. So without further ado, let's get up the notes here, and we will get to talking about the biggest films. Why don't we start off with a little bit of Scream? How about that? Just because I don't think I'll run into like issues with spoilers, but even if I do, the spoiler embargo is passed. So little behind the scenes stuff here. For bigger films that have like bigger twists and all that, there's a spoiler embargo, and I believe it's passed now. Like I believe like the spoiler embargo is for like Monday when you can spill the beans. But for the sake of everyone else here, like it as a courtesy, there will be no spoilers in case you want to check out on Scream. So I won't reveal who the killer is. So don't worry about that. Oh, and also, in case anyone's wondering why I'm not reviewing Shazam: Fury of the Gods this week, which you would think I would, since that's like the big one coming out. But here's the thing: I don't think we actually got a screener for that film, and actually I don't think like the embargo didn't lift until like just today, so that's usually not a good sign. I haven't taken a look at any of the reviews yet. I haven't read any of them yet, but usually when you hold off till like the last minute on Thursday and you don't send out screeners for your film, that's usually not a good sign. Usually it usually is. I only say that just because like I've had it happen with like films like the reboot of Child's Play, and it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, but we didn't get a screener for it, and critics didn't get a chance to see it. But that being said, more often than not when it happens, it's usually because the studio's afraid, and sometimes because it's not good. So yeah. So eventually I'll get around to talking about Shazam. Just not now because we didn't get a screener for it. All right. So let's talk about Scream here. Get up my notes here. All right. And here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So Scream 6 is another Scream film, but this one actually feels like it's better embracing that kind of like that more engaging slasher element rather than just being more of like the meta movie that we saw in the fifth Scream film last year, which was just called Scream. It wasn't and like you had the perfect opportunity to put the little like 5 in like the S, and they didn't do that either. So it was just called Scream. It was pretty much like a reboot, even though it's not a reboot because it did have legacy actors and all that. Now, the Scream film from last year, I believe it was last year that it came out. I wasn't a big fan of that version of Scream just because I felt like it became too meta, and I kind of don't like how it was commenting on what's the term for it? Not like prestige horror, but like kind of like high-minded horror. So it's like, for people who watch stuff like The Babadook, and like stuff like Jordan Peele's Get Out and stuff like that. That's not real horror. That's just more of like the artsy, higher minded horror films. And that was like the whole drive of like the killers in that film, was that they were obsessed horror movie fans and that they just wanted slasher films to go back to what they always were. Thankfully, Scream 6 is not that. In fact, Scream 6 actually has some really great twists because the film kind of starts off that way. Like it starts off going the same route that you would expect from like the last Scream film, where it's just a bunch of obsessed horror movie fans who are just want to, reenact horror and just like, carve out more slasher concepts. And then immediately and somewhat literally guts that premise immediately, saying, who cares about that? There's something much bigger here in Scream 6 than just, horror movie commentary, because we already did that. And that's kind of the one thing I like about the Scream franchise, is that even when they have lesser entries, like I wasn't that big of a fan of like the fifth Scream film, and even like, Scream 3 is a little bit behind that, they always have a very knowing nature to them, where it's fascinating just to see how they comment on the state of horror and slashers and kind of play around with the concept. The sixth film, I actually kind of like how it embraces a little bit of that meta mentality, but at the same time tries to be a slasher in its own right with its own lore. And a lot of that is contributed to the fact that it doesn't, because we got such a compared to like the distance between like Scream 4 and Scream 5, we don't have to introduce like a whole new slew of characters. We can follow the characters from the last film, we can build on them, and we can develop with them, which is great because there's actually a lot to build on with these characters. So, like right out of the gate, though, we got to mention, yes, the setting for Scream 6 changes from like Westboro to over to New York City. So you've got a new playground of different settings, which is great for this type of film. I think it works. And we get to explore more of the surviving characters. We have Sam Carpenter, played by Melissa Barrera, and she's trying to come to terms with like the big shocking revelation that she was a relation of the original Ghostface killer, and it's trying to fight off this idea of like being a murderer is kind of like something that's she believes it's in her blood, like it's part of her legacy, and that it's something that she can't escape from, especially when you've survived such an incident and you want to just like deal out revenge and feel like it's warranted, which plays a fairly big role in the film of just like contemplating violence and revenge, and how to combat it and how to like stop its perpetuating. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have you have Sam's relation of Tara, her half sister, played by Jenna Ortega, and she's kind of gone in the opposite direction. She wants to put the slasher business behind her. She doesn't want to go to therapy. She doesn't want to comment on it. She just wants to move on with her life. So these are two characters who are very interesting in terms of where they want to be in this, like they still realize that they're in a slasher film, mostly because like you have the horror nerd Mindy, who returns here once again to tell us all about what type of horror film they're in, what are the stakes, what are the characters, who to trust, who to not trust, and it's just kind of like, and it's I love how like Mindy doesn't have like a full grasp of what type of film this is. She says that this type of film is like a franchise film, which basically means that like no legacy characters are safe, there might not be plot armor, that something has to be shaken up, and that there's going to be twists and subversions. So it's a very like I said, very knowing, but I love the fact that like that meta nature of like understanding horror movies doesn't play into the core aspects of revenge, because the new Ghostface killer is specifically targeting Sam for something that happened in Sam's past. And it's not just like, like horror movie nerds obsessed with her. Like I said, they got that premise immediately, and just the perfect subversion that you want for this type of film. So we're constantly left guessing, who is this Ghostface killer? What does he want? What's his motivation? And, is there more than one killer about? And this leads to a lot of great kills and a lot of great set pieces. Like, first off, I'll mention like the set pieces they have here are great. Like there's a great scene in a convenience store where Sam and Tara are fleeing for their lives from Ghostface, who's armed with a shotgun at one point. There's a great scene in an apartment building when they've got to make a daring escape off the ledge, so you've got great tension there as well. And then like in a very over the top fashion, you've got a Ghostface museum at one point that the characters get trapped in and are constantly terrorized by Ghostface running all over the place. So great set pieces. But then when you get to the kills themselves are shocking for two reasons. One is because of the amount of stabbing and blood. There's a lot of it here. There's a few little callbacks to like some similar kills from the last film. In particular, there's a kill in a doorway where a knife goes into the face, which is like, it's brutal, it's still really good, but it's just like, it kind of made me think, okay, this is like the fifth Scream film. But then there's some more clever kills, like I said, there's like stuff with the shotgun. There's scenes where characters get stabbed multiple times, and here's the other shocking thing: it's more shocking who survives through all this, for how much, like these characters are survivors at this rate. Like in particular, like the core survivors of like Sam, Tara, Mindy, and the name's escaping me at the moment. Oh God, it's Chad. They refer to themselves as like the core four, because they believe that since they survived the last film, they're definitely going to survive this film. Although if you keep track of like horror movie logic, that is definitely not always the case. When you look at films like like the characters who survived like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, not all of them survived in Part 4. In fact, a lot of them got killed off pretty early in Part 4. So like it's not as predictable this time, and there's a lot of surprises with that. The kills are just, like I said, the kills are bloody and brutal. There's some very vicious scenes. Like one of them gets like tossed out a window. One of them gets like stabbed in the guts really like painfully, where there's like blood gushing out all over the place. Very vicious kills. People getting their necks slit. Tons of stuff like that. So yeah, like in terms of like the atmosphere and the kills and better building up the characters, they do a great job with. Even the legacy characters, I think they do a better job introducing them here than I think they did in the last film. And I think that's mostly because there's not as many returning legacy characters this time, where it is more interesting to see like a few legacy characters as opposed to just like, pushing them all out on the screen. You do have that moment where what's her name? Hayden, I always mispronounce her name. Hayden Panettiere, I swear I'm probably butchering her name, but she returns as Kirby. And the moment they introduce her, they do the same thing they did the last film, where she turns to the camera, they play the triumphant music, and I'm sure like the Scream fans in the audience are meant to clap, but just like, woo, it's our favorite character from Scream 4. It's been a while. To her credit, though, I really did like Hayden in this role as Kirby, who's become like an FBI officer now who specializes in Ghostface. In fact, like I kind of like her. I really like her look too. She looks amazing in this film with like her short hair and kind of like the leather getup, and she has like this feisty attitude for catching up with Ghostface. So it was a lot of fun to have her on the screen. Another returning character, you have Courtney Cox back as Gail, who's still hunting for the best stories. Although she's mostly the same character, although she has a lot more to do in this film. In particular, she has a great showdown with Ghostface where, she's been at this long enough where it feels like, she should have some smarts for tackling Ghostface. And she does. That's one of the great hallmarks of Scream, is that it's characters who have been who are aware of horror films and the logic and what's come before them, but will still be trapped and still make mistakes, even if they make the smart calls. And for sure, Gail makes some of like the smartest calls in the entire film. And even she kind of gets a little bit of like, even Ghostface kind of gets a drop on her. She's like, even she's prepared for this. She knows about it. She knows like the little tricks of like when Ghostface is talking on the phone, how to track him and, where to find him in the room. All these great little bits that, just they carry like that kind of like wicked dark humor that you want in the film. And Courtney Cox just has pitch perfect delivery with that. And then of course you have a few wild cards thrown into the bunch just to, keep you guessing about who the killer is going to be. You have Josh Segarra as a love interest for Sam, who she fraternizes with, but you're kind of like, this guy's a little stacked and kind of a little bit, it seems like he might be in on this. You have Dermot Mulrooney as a detective who's very bitter and wants bloody vengeance, so you think he might be in on it. And then, of course, you have a few other characters, like you have like a, kind of like a little bit of like an outsider kid who kind of looks like Jesse Eisenberg a little bit. He might a little bit. Maybe just like the curly hair that's throwing me. And then you have like a very sex-positive roommate who could be in on it as well. And as the film progresses, there's twist after twist that keeps you guessing the whole time. And even when there's like a trail of clues led to who you think the real killer is, it shifts around even more. So it keeps you guessing, where it's a genuine surprise. And even when you get to the final twist and the Ghostface killer is revealed, it makes sense who this is and why they're doing it, and plays greatly into the themes of revenge and violence. Which is great, especially when, you have that theme and a lot of the characters here have a genuine motive for violence and revenge. And it's just, and it's not so much terrifying as it is intriguing and intense. Like with the last Scream film, I was kind of like, okay, this is more or less what I expect from Scream. But then Scream 6, it feels like it just got a shot of adrenaline. And and it's just I can't even pin it down to like one thing. It's like, I mean, yeah, there's lots of twists and subversions. There's a change of scenery. That's great. There's more kills. There's more blood and guts. That's really great. Although I should admit though, I was surprised by how many characters live in this film more than those that die, especially for how many stabs to the gut they take. There are so many characters who get stabbed right in the gut, like painfully in this film, that it's surprising how many survive. But just everything combined, I think it makes for such a perfect sequel for a film that, for following up on a film that had to set up a whole new batch of characters, had to establish them, had to set new ground rules for Scream. And here in Scream 6, it feels like the characters have kind of come more into their own, and that there's a more defined lore to what's happening, where it's not just playing up the nostalgia, even though they do highlight like every ghost face from every other Scream film. But it's weaved in, I think, brilliantly here, where it doesn't just become part of like the legacy sequel that you expect, especially since they drop like the whole like changing of like the names of the sequel. There's no like Scream Forever, Scream the Revenge. It's just Scream 6. It's continuing on, and it's doing what Scream does best. So at this point, for as far as this franchise has come, it's holding up remarkably well with Scream 6, where I must admit I'm actually kind of intrigued to see where they would go with the next Scream film, just because they've developed these characters enough where I'm intrigued, I'm interested, and they have and they weave the kind of the lore and mythology of slasher films into this so well that it just makes for a fascinating story. And it's edge of your seat horror, and it's Scream. It does what I love the most out of Scream, and this is definitely one of the top sequels of the series. So there you go. Scream 6, currently playing in theaters right now. I believe it actually did really well for a horror film, which is good. I always get kind of worried that, when horror films underperform, like, studios aren't going to invest more money in them. And thankfully, films like Cocaine Bear and Scream 6 have been doing just fine. Just fine. They haven't been like breaking the box office, but they have been, making the money back and doing good business. That's one of the things. Like it's like horror is usually pretty low budget, that you can take risks and you can keep working on them. It's just like when you get to stuff like Scream and Cocaine Bear and like your franchise slashers, is when the budget starts getting, in like the double digits of the millions, where you kind of worry about it. Like a small independent horror film that costs anywhere from like, $9 to $5 million. Just like if it makes a decent weekend, that's great. It's great for it. They'll keep going. But if you want like a horror saga to continue, it's gotta be a good success. What are your thoughts on Scream 3? I think it's underrated. With Scream 3, I've kind of like, it's been like a roller coaster for me. Like when it first came out, I was kind of a little bit tired of the premise. Like it didn't quite work for me. And then I came back to it with Scream. And then I think around the time of like Scream 4, I came back to it. And I rewatched it, like, oh, you know what? There's actually some pretty good scenes in here. Where it's like, it's still not my favorite, but there were a few good scenes there that I kind of really liked. And then I think about like 5 years ago, I rewatched it, and I was just like, I don't know, I was watching it like at the gym and a little bit, and I was just kind of like, oh, this is not holding up as well as I thought it did. And the thing is, I might come around on it again. It's one of those weird ones. Like, it's one of those ones where I always place it at the bottom. I don't feel like it's like, like it ruined the saga or whatever that we got like no Scream films for like a decade, but it's definitely not the one I have in high regard. I do think it gets like unfairly savaged a lot, just because everyone's like, oh god, it's the worst film. And it's like, even though like, yeah, I agree, it's like it's at the bottom, there's still some aspects of it I love. Like they do have some quality kills in it. I do love the kills in that film, but yeah, it's still low on the list. I don't think it deserves all the hate that it gets, but it's definitely at the bottom of my ranking. Just I feel like it's one of those things where over time it changes. Like I said, my opinion on it has changed over time. I think a lot of people's opinions on Scream 3 have changed a lot. I've heard a lot of people say that Scream 3 is actually their favorite one. And they've written a little bit about it, and I find it intriguing that it's kind of making me almost want to go back and watch it again. And I think I might. So yeah. Yeah, it's one of those ones that I fluctuate on. I did find it fascinating how in Scream 6 they actually do talk about horror franchises a little bit. Like at one point they discuss like which Nightmare on Elm Street is best, which Friday the 13th film is the best, which Candyman film is the best, like the first one or the remake, which they answer both, which is okay. That's correct. I do like the way that they frame the film. Like they ask, like, okay, what's the best Nightmare on Elm Street film? The first one, correct. What's the best Friday the 13th film? And they argue between the first one and the fourth one. and to its credit, like the person who says it's the fourth one is like, I have a thing for Corey Feldman. I think that's true. Like with Friday the 13th, there's so many entries that you kind of form your own favorite in there. Like I'm kind of somewhere between the first film and the sixth film. Or like I debate between which one is my favorite. Although I must admit that there is a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for 4. Just because it was like Corey Feldman and who's the oh god, there's another from Back to the Future. What's his name? Oh god, this is gonna drive me nuts here. I gotta look it up really quick here. Not dang it. I know I'm gonna screw up his name. So was it? It was Crispin Glover. That's it. I love Crispin Glover in the fourth film too. So yeah, that's one of those like more comforting Friday the 13th films, if that makes any sense. You get to see Glover do a cute little dance in it. What can I say? And because well yeah, Parker Posey is I think that's I've actually like I've seen like a few articles that specifically point out like Parker Posey as being the best thing in that film. So yeah. I have to go and rewatch it because I feel like it's gonna change over time. It might. I honestly because I haven't rewatched Scream 3 since Scream 5, and given how much I didn't really dig on Scream 5, I might actually place it below Scream 3. I would have to rewatch it again. Like it's one of those things that I gotta reassess. Like I can immediately rank like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street films in my mind, but Scream films I always fluctuate on, just because like a lot of them like they hold up so well over time that the more you watch them, you're just like, oh man, this is really clever. Even despite how meta it's trying to be, it's actually working. Which is why I'm happy that Scream 6 was such a good film. All right. I can already feel like my voice is kind of going to get lost here. So I'll go to like the big film we got to cover. John Wick, Chapter 4. Here we go. Get up my notes. Alrighty. Fix my hair here. This is an early review, just so everyone knows. John Wick Chapter 4 does not come out until March 24th. So this will be an early review, and I swear this will be spoiler free. In fact, you know what? I have a spoiler free card here. Let's put that up as well. There we go. On the off chance that nobody wants like John Wick spoilers. All right. So let me get my notes up here, and in 3, 2, 1. So, John Wick, Chapter 4, is another film where Keanu Reeves goes on a rampage, a killing spree, one of his longest ones yet, as he continues to fight against the High Table. So, I doubt it's going to surprise many when I tell everybody that this film has amazing fight scenes, amazing atmosphere, a great score, great tension, and a fantastic cast. I'm sure, like, that, if you're a fan of the John Wick films, that should be what you expect at this point. And yet, it still amazes me. It's still just, floors me that we're at the fourth film in John Wick's saga, and it's still brimming with incredible style and just over-the-top fight sequences and just bloody, brutal, elaborate sequences and just an incredible tone throughout. It still has the magic after all that time where at this point I could pretty much just declare like John Wick is like the perfect quadrilogy. Like every film in this I've loved, and including this one. So if you're curious, like because a lot of people are just gonna say, oh, John Wick is just a series of fight scenes, and it's a series of great fight scenes, but there's still a plot here. And Chapter 4 has, I think, the most interesting developments in this continuing story of Wick's seeking of vengeance and freedom. So, quick little recap for those who aren't familiar with John Wick. So he's getting revenge for his, after his wife dies, his dog is killed, his car is stolen, goes after it, goes on a killing spree, and even when it feels like he's gotten back what he wants and proven his revenge, he goes even further. And after he goes further, the High Table targets him, and he becomes the most wanted hitman in the world. So everyone is after him. And Chapter 4 pretty much begins around at the same point in Chapter 3, where, Wick is still on the run, he's still being pursued, and he's still fighting his way up the High Table. But he's got to fight a little bit smarter this time, for two reasons. One is because the High Table realized that, John Wick can fight through anything. Keanu Reeves, once again, total badass, just kills everyone in the room. And the High Table, realizing this, tries to find not just more ways to hire more assassins, but also more ways to kind of target what John Wick would value most in this world, which is they realize that John Wick can lay waste to tons of people, but his friends can't. They know that the concierge, not the concierge, the Continental hotel runner, Winston Scott, played by Ian McShane again, they know that he's an old guy. He can't really defend himself. So, of course, when the High Table comes after him and his concierge, once again played by Lance Reddick, that, Wick is kind of leaving a trail of death. And this happens again when he ventures off to the Japanese version of the Continental, and it just so happens that the person there who runs that Continental is also an old friend of John Wick. And at that time, like, he makes the owner makes a tough call. It's like, do I defend John Wick, or do I just, turn him in and save myself and save everyone? And his friend doesn't, because he realizes that, Wick is not just fighting the High Table. He's fighting the High Table and its hierarchical reign over hitmen, where they feel like, the higher-ups can do whatever they want, and there's very little punishment. And Wick is proving them wrong. So a lot of the people who have been in this business for a long time realize that, this is something worth fighting for, even if it feels like there's insurmountable odds. And then, of course, this leads to plenty of daring fight scenes, but also, like, conflicted fights about whether or not Wick is determined to continue on the fight. In particular, one of his old friends that's brought up in this film is Kane, a blind High Table assassin played by Donnie Yen. They have a history together, and Kane has a daughter that he wants to protect, and the High Table's threatening him that, you can't have this life unless you go and kill John Wick. So he's got his reasons, and it's not going to be an easy battle for Wick once he kind of realizes this, especially since they're old friends. Another aspect that complicates this is there's a tracking bounty hunter called Mr. Nobody, played by Shamir Anderson, who it feels like this is like the villain that you'd love to see go down, just because this guy only operates on greed. Like he doesn't kill John Wick. He basically tracks him down, gets a beat on him, and then contacts the high table saying, "Hey, I got this guy you're looking for. Why don't you up the bounty and I'll bring him in?" So for being so driven by greed, you feel like, okay, he's got it coming. But here's the thing: he's got a dog. He's got a dog assassin with him, and it's very much like the last film, like you remember with was it like Halle Berry's character? She had like those two dogs who constantly went after assassins by by biting them in the throat and biting them in the nuts. It's the same deal here, except there's a lot more biting of the nuts. In fact, Mr. Nobody trains his dog specifically to bite assassins by just saying nuts. And let's just say that there's a lot of scenes of dogs biting genitals in this film. A lot. In addition to all the other violent deaths and kills. So realizing all this, John Wick realizes that he has to fight more intelligently. He can't just, kill his way out of this. I mean, technically he can, but he's got to find the right way to kill and at the right time and under the rules of the high table, despite the fact that the high table does not play by the rules. So there's this great commentary on tackling hierarchical systems by trying to play by their rules, even though the system itself does not play by the rules. That even if you accomplish insurmountable odds, considering how many bodies that John Wick has killed over the course of these three films, and even in the fourth film, the body count is way, way, way high in this film. Even after all that, it feels like you have to do all this just to gain some sense of freedom and for a towering system just to leave you alone. And I feel like that it becomes much more apparent in this film more than the other films. I got like a theme as a whole. I think it works for John Wick, but it's more apparent in Chapter 4, specifically because like the last big multiple fighters. The last big fight scene with like multiple fighters coming into it is a scene where John Wick has to ascend like about 200 steps up to get to his final destination where he'll have his big showdown. And he just keeps getting his ass kicked. Like it feels like he's almost to the top step and then literally just gets kicked all the way back down to the bottom all over again. And has to accomplish the impossible by being like beaten after an entire night of just getting, stabbed and shot at and tossed and bruised and punched and nearly set aflame. And then he has to, get tossed down all the stairs and walk right back up again. And it's such a perfect like symbolism of like John Wick's, ever present climb to, conquer this unconquerable mountain of this hierarchical system. Okay, so that's like the bigger theme. But of course, the big thing that everyone is coming for this film, obviously the biggest draw, is the fight scenes. And there's a lot of them, and they're great. It's tough to explain just like, I feel like I can only talk about this in like the highlights here. Like with John Wick, you get to see him do battle with nunchucks at one point. Like when he's going through the Japanese Continental, he gets a hold of some nunchucks and starts beating down assassins with them and actually killing them with it. And there's like I said, there's great like tongue-in-cheek moments within like the violence. Like at one point, there's a split-second realization where Wick is staring down two assassins that kind of look at him with this kind of look like, wait, is he really going to use nunchucks to kill us? And then he proceeds to like, yes, he is going to kill people with nunchucks. Donnie Yen has some great moments as well. In particular because I love the way that he fights with kind of like this almost kind of like Zatoichi style, like, like the blind swordsman. The way he carries around a cane and just like slices people up. I love how during one sequence, in order to track down assassins, he uses an electronic doorbell system. Like he just attaches like automatic doorbells to things to reveal to reveal people's locations and then gun them down with ease, which is a lot of fun to watch. Plus, Donnie Yen is just so amazing in this role. Like he bites back hard when like the high table threatens him. He gets some of like the coolest lines. Like at one point he's threatened to like take part in a poker game, and he just, he makes like, dude, I'm a blind guy and you want me to play poker? Really? That's what you're doing? And you get so many great lines like that. There's a lot of other cast members I forgot to mention here. Of course, I can't forget Bill Skarsgård as the new Marquis of the High Table, who is just the perfect kind of smarmy villain, who takes delight in pain and pleasure, in the pleasures of pain, because he realizes that he controls other people. He's very much aware of what Wick is fighting against and wants to squash it at any chance he get. And Bill Skarsgård is just so great at being this insidious villain who you can't wait to see John Wick like take this guy down. Just because he's such a scummy guy. He's like a coward. He gets everyone to do his battles for him. Even in like the final showdown, he literally has someone else do his fighting for him. That you can't wait to see him go down. So he's a perfect villain, especially when you know how much power he has and that he knows how to wield it in just the right way to piss off John Wick. In this film, I think more than any other, there's a lot of like globetrotting as well. Like, we go to New York and see that Continental. We go to Japan and see another Continental. We stop in Berlin for a nightclub fight scene, and then like they have the big showdown in Paris, which there's an elaborate fight scene around the Arc de Triomphe. Like if you're familiar, like the Arc de Triomphe, it has like that roundabout, and there's an entire fight scene where it's just in the roundabout. So John Wick is fighting assassins in oncoming traffic and keep in mind, like nearly everyone in this city wants to kill him. So it's oncoming traffic of everybody who wants to kill him, and they're all wielding guns. They're all steering towards him. They're all smashing into him. And it's just, it's just such like pulse pounding and just so beautifully crafted. Like the amount of planning that would have to go into that scene is just astounding. Like it's mind-boggling to like, to fathom like how they approach this scene of like, okay, John goes here and then he hides behind this car and then this car smashes into this one and then he has to go to this lane and then, there's a showdown between these two lanes. It's just like there's so much planning that had to go into it that it's amazing to watch it unfold. And then of course you get that great shot once like John leaves the scene and you see just how many bodies he's mounted in the Arc de Triomphe. But the other thing I was going to talk about was the Berlin nightclub scene, which, I mean, it feels like quintessential at this point. Like you've got to have a nightclub fight scene in order to have like that kind of like neo-noir John Wick style. And it goes like over the top for this one just because you've Scott Adkins playing this character called Killa. And he's a huge guy. He's got like golden teeth. He's just like such a, like he has this like cackle to him, and he's just like this towering big guy. Like he looks like a Dick Tracy villain almost. And I think I mostly attribute that just like to his size, the way he's depicted, and the fact that like his office looks like a combination between like a rave and like a set from Blade Runner, because he's got like the neon lights going, but then he's also kind of got like the smoky barroom style, and then he's got like the giant fan overhead. Just amazing attention to detail in this place. And then when you actually do get to like him fighting Killa in the nightclub, which I love the fact that like the nightclub doesn't disperse until John finally kills Killa, because up until that point, like everyone is just kind of like dancing, they're fine with it. I think just because they're like, you know what, fine. There's bad guy, there's John Wick. Let Killa handle it, because everyone just keeps dancing while John Wick is killing assassin after assassin. Which is just like, I find that fascinating because as weird as it is, it kind of plays into the dynamic of John Wick's world where everyone is obsessed with money and they're able to get away with, all this violence that it feels like it's just so commonplace that barely anyone cares, because like oh, should we interfere? Should we run? John Wick is shooting up people. Whatever. There's a bounty on his head. People got to work. So everyone just kind of treats it as this casual nature, especially when you have like the high table coming on over the radio to announce like, hey, by the way, John Wick's over out at the Arc de Triomphe if y'all want to swing on by and try to kill him. Which they track throughout the film while still playing, classic rock to go with all of it. Although I don't think it's quite classic rock. There's some like covers, I'm pretty sure, but yeah, just great casting, and of course, like worth mentioning is also Clancy Brown playing the Harbinger, one of the high-ranking operatives of the High Table. He doesn't have much to do, but sometimes it's just nice to see Clancy Brown. Like, he brings a little bit of that, like, that deep voice class to see it there with his big white beard, and I love the little disfigurement he's got on his face, and this very, like, serious, like, dark tone that he's got to himself, where it's just, like, where it feels like Bill Skarsgård is, like, someone that John Wick could kill, but despite how old Clancy Brown is, like, you listen to that voice, like, I don't know if I want to take him down. So, and then, of course, another highlight worth mentioning here is, of course, Lawrence Fishburne as the Bowery King. He doesn't have as much to do in this film. He more or less just kind of like tags along with John Wick and kind of provides him with his material. He's more or less kind of like Q from James Bond at this point. Just like, hey, I got, like, because that's pretty much all he does. Like, hey, check it out. I got you a new suit. I got you a new gun. Pretty cool, right? But he does chew up the few scenes that he has. Which is great, especially for like the big opening scene with Lawrence Fishburne just announcing himself and just cackling so much that it's just like, oh, that's not only the perfect way to open the film, that's the perfect way to use Lawrence Fishburne in a film. In addition to everyone else who gets used, you're like who else? Yeah, you have Hiroyuki Sanada as Koji, the Osaka manager I mentioned. He's great for his fight scenes, especially with the Japanese Continental, with all it's like, they have so many weapons in that place. They have swords, they have guns, they have arrows, they have nunchucks, like I said, they have blades. So much fun stuff happens during that opening fight scene. You have you kind of a very brief role by Rina Sawayama as Akira, Koji's daughter. She gets to fight along John Wick for a few scenes, and she also provides a good counterpoint about how John needs to consider the wake that he's leaving in all this. So everyone who's close to John Wick feels like they have like a huge role to play in this. That by the time you get to the finale, it unfolds beautifully, and just like, for as long as this film goes on for, like, I believe it's like almost 3 hours, like 169 minutes. There wasn't a moment of this that I was bored. And of course, that's attributed to like the extended fight scenes, which go on for a long time, but just like you're impressed by how they unfold and like, how much they span. Just like the entire fight scenes around Paris, where they're just like, where John is running and gunning into like abandoned buildings and the Arc de Triomphe, and running through churches and just all over the place. Just great set pieces. In particular, there's one scene that I loved. There's a great scene where John gets a hold of one of the assassins who has a gun that essentially shoots bullets that explode into fire upon impact. And he's running through this abandoned building, just gunning down all these assassins. And the camera pulls up to like this overhead view that follows John through like each room while you're looking directly down at him. And it's one of those shots from just like, oh my God, this looks exactly like Hotline Miami. It's, for anyone who's played the video game Hotline, it's exactly like the perspective of that video game. It even has like the same kind of layout that you would expect from like Hotline Miami, and like the running and gunning and watching characters flee and fire, and with like the blood splatter on the floor. It's just like, I'm not saying that like I don't want to like explicitly say that like director Chad Stahelski was like, gaining inspiration from Hotline Miami, but it certainly feels like it. It felt like a very Hotline Miami moment there, especially for how long we hold with like that overhead shot. So yeah, I doubt there's much more I can say here. Like, if you are a John Wick fan, this is, and I don't want to make this sound condescending too, because it's more of the same in that it's what you would expect from a John Wick film, but also better developing its story about, John's continuing nature of revenge against the High Table, and questioning where, how to get to that point. And it looks amazing. Just the atmosphere, the fights are great. Keanu Reeves still has, a lot of fun in this role. He has a lot of tongue-in-cheek moments of just like, yeah, getting back up. And it's so much fun. I don't know how else to describe this, because like I don't want to, like, I mean, saying more of the same kind of sounds like a condemnation, but the past few films have just been so brilliant and fantastic that I doubt that saying it's more of the same is going to be condescending. Because really, with all four films considered, this is an amazing, like, action quadrilogy. And I feel like I have to say that because, like, how many quadrilogies can you think of that are just like, that are perfect? Where like every entry you love so much, and that it continues on, with each entry it gets better and better and better. And sure enough, Chapter 4 continues on the tradition, and it's better than Chapter 3, and Chapter 3 was pretty damn good. So yeah, in case it didn't need to be said, I absolutely love the hell out of John Wick Chapter 4. Oh god. I don't know how much more I can gush about that film, just because it's so... Oh, I cannot wait for you guys to see this. I cannot wait for this film to come out next week and everyone see it and everyone gush so much about how much they love this saga. Oh, and I didn't reveal any spoilers too. Perfect. And trust me, I could have. There's some big spoilers that I could reveal. I didn't even reveal all the cool weapons that they use in the film. Like, I talked about the exploding bullet gun and the nunchucks. There's some more stuff in there. I swear I have to rewatch this film just to recount how much amazing crap there was in this film. I dare say this film might end up on my best of the year list. I think so. I haven't put it on any of my best of the year lists just because it's been stiff competition every year. But I don't know. It might this year. Because I love this film. Alright. So let's take things down a notch here. We'll talk about EO. The Polish donkey movie. What a change of pace here. I'm not kidding though. It's a Polish donkey movie. It was nominated for the Academy Award of Best International Feature. So, okay, so we'll talk about this. Let me get my notes up here. All right. And 3, 2, 1. So, EO is a film all about a donkey. The donkey is the central character. We follow the donkey throughout this film. And the entire film is through the donkey's perspective. So this was a Polish film. It was nominated at the Academy Awards for the Best International Film. It didn't win. Just because I think, like, this is a film that's, like, it's so cerebral that I don't know if it's going to appeal to as many people. Just because it's a film that it says a lot without saying very much at all, if that makes any sense. The best way I can describe it is, like, if anyone has seen the film, it's by Robert Bresson. It's called Alcazar I'm going to butcher the name here. Alcazar Balthazar. And it's a film all about a donkey's journey and a donkey's eventual, like, death and the humans that the donkey comes into contact with. EO is very much in that, like, it's a very easy comparison because it's a similar story. It takes place in modern times. You follow a donkey. The donkey interacts, not quite interact, I guess. He does interact a little bit, but he encounters several human characters, and he learns about humanity, and then eventually goes in, leads his life right up to his death. So, to talk about this film, like, it's weird, because, like, you almost have to kind of, like, talk about it on a, on a little bit of, like, an existential level, just to explain what makes it so brilliant. Because there are going to be, I'll say right off the bat, this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people are going to watch this film and just be like, I don't get it. It's just a donkey walking around. What's saying? But the donkey encounter is like humanity's best and worst, which is the central. I doubt I even have to say it. That's like the central theme. If you watch Balthazar, it's pretty much the same deal. So yeah, it's just Io. He starts off in a circus. He's loved and cared for by Cassandra, but the donkey has to be sold off, and the donkey gets sold off to like a farm where it's a bunch of kids get to pet it and show it some love. And eventually Cassandra finds her way back to Io. But Io's life kind of goes a little bit downhill after that. Io gets taken in by people who want to like haul animal corpses. Io tries to fight back, but he's still kind of bound by the human world. There isn't really much of an escape for him. At one point he encounters a football team who kind of use him as a mascot, but the opposing team beat him up. So you have like humanity's hideousness through its competitive nature through there. And then later on you kind of get to see a donkey bear witness to humans who squabble over their life choices and basically money and sex, I think, is the best way to describe kind of more of that final arc. And in between all this, you mostly just watch like Io's perspective. Like Io just watches and silently kind of judges. You get a little bit of insight into Io's mind. Like at one point, there's a very trippy and almost like nightmarish sequence where Io has this dream of a windmill in a field, and everything is red. The sky is red. There's like a red haze everywhere, and it just makes you question, just like what is Io thinking? And more importantly, like you look at Io. And with his kind of like big eyes that kind of like reflect back the world, you start asking like, okay, how do animals view us? Because like, even if you're not as engaged with Io's journey, it like you're still kind of questioning in your mind, like, okay, this is a real donkey in this role. What is going through the donkey's mind at this point, and how does it feel about the world that's being presented around it, which is more or less what Io is trying to accomplish. So even when you're not so much thinking about the central narrative that's going on here, and you're kind of thinking more about the production wise, you're still more or less on the same wavelength about what this film is trying to communicate about man's relationship with nature. I don't think it's exactly on the same level as Balthazar, just because I think like for anyone who's seen like Bresson's Balthazar, like that's a film that has like a lot of religious undertones and iconography, and it's a little bit more kind of like surface level like Christian iconography. Like you look at how like the donkey is like stabbed in a similar way to Christ. You see aspects of like wine and bread, and how Io is eventually led to his death that kind of relates to Christ a little bit. It's more on a surface level. Like Bresson's spirituality aspect is a little bit up in the air, but the big thing with Io, I think, is that not Io, talking about Balthazar. The big thing with like Balthazar is that Bresson wanted to communicate that that the more that we grow older, we start seeing like start to see like aspects of God in nature and kind of better connect with it. More or less what, if I'm remembering the quote correctly, like Bresson was basically trying to communicate that that you need to recognize the soul in more than just like humans, and that you need to be cognizant of the world around you. And Io, I feel like it's in that same vein where it's making you like question humanity's relationship to nature, and how within more modern times, Io is kind of like placed on this very rigid track. And I love that kind of theme throughout it. Like, even when like Io has moments to escape, he's still on a track. When we get up to Io's death, he's also on a track. Everything for Io's life is dictated by humans, and very little of it seems to be actually instigated or preferred by Io, which makes us kind of like, question like, how much, how much independence do animals have to kind of form their own opinions on humanity? And if they did have that autonomy, then, how would they judge us, which is more or less what you start thinking of. And it's kind of interesting to kind of consider that through these many arcs that, I guess it would be arcs, they're kind of more like vignettes, for which Io encounters different humans. Like, some of them are nice and kind and loving. Others are hurtful. Others are like thieves, and others are just straight up murderous at times. So yeah, it's one of those films that's just like, it's great to just like kind of like munch on cerebrally, just to like think about the relationship that humans have with animals. And I mean, if you're going to do a film with animals, I feel like this is one of the more interesting films you can do with it. Like, there's very few films I've seen in the past few years that center on animals and actually have something more deeply profound to say about them, rather than just making something kind of, like hokey melodrama with like a dog's life or something like that. Like, the closest comparison I can think would be something like White God, which is a little bit, a little bit more on like the darker violent side, because it's a story about a dog leading a whole bunch of dogs into a rebellion after judging humanity. But Io is kind of more of like a kind of like quiet contemplation and judgment about man's relationship with nature, which for this type of film, it works incredibly well. So Io, nominated for the Oscar. It's currently playing, I believe it's still playing on the Criterion Channel. Because I know that's like the big thing at Criterion. They say like, hey, guess what? We got Io. We got an Oscar-nominated film. I mean, that too, and also because Michelle Yeoh won the Oscar, they said, oh, well, we got Michelle Yeoh films. If y'all interested, come watch The Heroic Trio, where you can watch Michelle Yeoh get possessed by an evil skeleton. Fun stuff. And lastly, this was kind of a last-minute film. But yeah, I don't have as much to say in this one. But I figured I'd cover it as well, because why not? Just because there's a tender spot in my heart for Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Alright. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Aqua Teen Hunger Forever Plantasm is the second Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie. And I remember when I saw the last Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie, and way back in 2007, what's it called? Aqua Teen Hunger Force : movie film for theaters. And it was about what I expected from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. So like the whole draw, I think, of Aqua Teen is that it's a subversion of what you'd expect for what seems to be like, promoted within like the openings. Like, you watch the opening for Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and it's always portrayed as like this, like, action-packed, exciting sci-fi adventure series. And then you get to the actual show itself, and just like the characters just like meander, they ignore threats, they don't pay attention, they're apathetic, and everything just kind of blows up in their face, and barely anything works out for them. Which was a lot of the fun of Aqua Teen. That was what was great about it. I love what they did with the film, with movie film for theaters, because that did pretty much what I expected for Aqua Teen. They encounter a big threat to humanity and barely do anything about it. And they just get lost and sidetracked in all these other funny things that happen, which is great. Which is why I'm a bit disappointed in Plantasm, because Plantasm feels like it's just gonna throw all that out the window and just deliver kind of the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie that seems to be promised in like the openings. And I think it's just because like the characters succeed a lot. And I think as a finale that might be okay, but it just feels like this story is on too much of a rigid track. Because like the whole premise is that the characters of Shake, Frylock, Meatwad, and Carl, they've all separated, they've gone their separate ways. But then they're called back into action when they have to face off against a new threat. I believe his name was like Neil, was it? It was basically like a parody of kind of billionaires, so more or less Amazon with the way that they're portraying this character, just this short little rude guy. I'm trying to remember. It's Neil, voiced by Peter Sefrowitz, and Neil's basically it's basically just like an Amazon satire at that point. Like they show off how this character has enslaved alien worlds and forced them into slave labor, and tries to prevent them from unionizing, and ultimately ends up replacing them with plant monsters. But the plant monsters go haywire, they try to take over the world, and it's up to Aqua Teen Hunger Force to stop the plant monsters. And unfortunately, I guess, it sounds weird to say this, but unfortunately, that's exactly what they do. The Aqua Teen Hunger Force actually like train and prepare, and they use weapons, and they gun down and attack and fight the plant creatures in a very big way. And it just felt off for me. It's like, here's a film where it's like they stick so close to just like maintaining like the same story. It's just like, oh, there's a billionaire and he's going to ruin the planet with these plant monsters. There might be a little weird meta commentary in there about, nature and all that, but it's not hard to find here. And you'd feel like, okay, for this, that's a decent premise, but then you've got to make this feel more like Aqua Teen. It feels like they should get lost more in, with all the other like weird characters that they've set up. And they don't do much of that here, which is kind of a disappointment. The most we get is that we get the evil Moonanite characters keep interrupting the film at several points and fast forwarding through it and skipping parts. And they keep trying to ruin the movie, which is, it's funny for like the first 2 times, but I think they do this like 4 or 5 times throughout the entire film. And it keeps like they keep doing commentary on it, like oh, we're ruining your movie, the movie that you paid for, which your hard-earned money that you're only getting 75 minutes of, and we're wasting your time. Aren't we funny? And the thing is, it's pulling back the curtain a little bit too much, because yes, that's kind of been the joke with like a lot of Adult Swim shows, is that they're just trying to like troll the audience with what they're doing. That's a very Adult Swim thing to do. But here, the trolling is literally just the characters saying, haha, we're trolling you. Which is not that clever. Like, I don't mind if you want to like troll the audience. Like, Adult Swim has been like great at doing this. Like a perfect example is like there was a Space Ghost episode where they wasted 10 whole minutes of just Space Ghost following an ant home to kill it. That's great. But there's never a moment where like Space Ghost turns to the camera and says, haha, I am wasting valuable airtime of the Space Ghost episode chasing this ant. Because the joke itself is just that they're wasting your time. And that it's just absurd for how long it keeps going on. But with the Moonanites, it's like, you keep explaining the joke and it's not as funny. Like, there is some funny stuff they kind of do with this premise towards the end when like the Moonanites get their ass kicked. And they just fast forward through it and they're just going, oh, we're not going to show this part. I mean, it's, if you want, you kind of say like, okay, they're just kind of like aping off Spaceballs. They kind of did that same deal. But I kind of got a decent smirk out of that, which is saying a lot because there isn't a lot of incredibly funny stuff here. There's some smirk-worthy stuff, but I think the longer it keeps going, trying to establish this plot about this Amazon company and the plant creatures, it kind of loses its way. It kind of becomes very exposition heavy. It doesn't really find that many funny lines or asides. And you would think with so many characters they've developed in Aqua Teen, they could just throw in whatever they wanted. And yet there are a few that they use, but they're very sparingly used. Like I don't know, I was kind of a big fan of Markula. I thought he was a ridiculous vampire character. I would have liked to have seen more of him. and you do get a little bit of him. He kind of more or less bookends the film, but you can't help but feel like that there's so much more you could do with Aqua Teen and this premise, rather than just being a standard save the world, like, fight Amazon type story. And it's sadly not. It feels like it's just kind of on autopilot. And the fact that, as the last joke of the film, like, they've kind of got they have the Moonanites come in the credits and say, like, you just wasted 75 minutes of your life and $25 buying this Blu-ray so that you could do this. Even though I didn't buy the Blu-ray, I watched it on HBO Max, so the joke really doesn't work here. And I'm sure, like, most people realize, yeah, this is probably just going to end up on HBO Max anyway, so the joke doesn't work unless you're, like, a die-hard Aqua Teen fan and you bought the Blu-ray. And even then, you might feel gypped because it doesn't really feel like an Aqua Teen type of film. It feels like someone's fan servicey version of Aqua Teen, where it's like, I just want to see the Aqua Teens fight a bunch of people for the first time and actually be really good at it. And it's like, if that's what you want, okay, but that's not kind of been like the draw for Aqua Teen for me. The biggest draw has been that the Aqua Teen Hunger Force have always failed at what they've tried to accomplish, and they always get distracted and they always meander and find funnier stuff to do on top of, a general, like, save the world premise, which is usually just used as like a, not quite firm lattice for having all these other ridiculous jokes. And sadly, we don't get that. So we just get this kind of rigid save the world story, which doesn't really have as much fun with the characters as you'd like, which is a downer. I mean, I was really looking, I've loved Aqua Teen ever since I was in high school, and, coming back to it now, it doesn't have the same pizzazz. So, unfortunately, Plantasm it's not a good Aqua Teen movie. So Aqua Teen Hunger Forever Plantasm is currently playing on HBO Max, and it's available on Blu-ray. Should you be interested? All right. Ooh. So briefly, where did I have them here? There they are. So briefly, I wanted to briefly talk about the Academy Awards, which, in all honesty, were pretty great. Pretty much, most of, like, my locks for the night came true. I think based on, like, looking at all the other award shows, I think it was pretty much a lock. Like, Everything Everywhere All at Once, I predicted pretty much was going to be Best Picture, just because it had the biggest buzz behind it, and I honestly couldn't see any other film winning at that point. So that was pretty much a given. Like, the only other films that I think would have a chance would have been like All Quiet on the Western Front and maybe Top Gun Maverick. That's about it. Those were like its only competition. And I think there was a lot of buzz on Everything Everywhere All at Once. That I think after, like, the what was it? I think it was after the speech at either the Screen Actors Guild or the Producers Guild that I kind of, like, knew that that Everything Everywhere was going to win. I think it might have been the Screen Actors one, just because I had that feeling at that point when I saw how much buzz there was and how many awards they were winning, that was going to be the winner. Pretty much all the predicted ones here too, like Brendan Fraser for The Whale. Like I said, not a big surprise. He's been clearing all the awards. Ke Huy Quan for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Again, been clearing lots of awards. Saw it coming. Not a whole lot. So a lot of people are kind of like up in the air thinking that they wouldn't happen. Little bit of controversy over Jamie Lee Curtis winning for Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was kind of like the because, like, I knew a lot of people were pulling for Angela Bassett, and indeed, I was kind of predicting that she was going to win as well, just because that was a fantastic performance, and she had cleared a few awards. But Jamie Lee Curtis is like, she's kind of like the safe bet, just because she fits into that, like, that narrow range of kind of like the the typical Oscar voters of how they tend to vote, which is, it's a letdown because she was nominated for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and you also have Stephanie Sue for Everything Ever All at Once, which honestly, she does so much. Stephanie did so much more in that film, and her role was so much more intricate that I really feel like she should have won. I really think she should have won in that one. Like, I was either between like Angela Bassett or Stephanie Sue, and then I'm like, really, Jamie Lee Curtis won? I mean, not to slander Jamie Lee Curtis. I think this is like her first big Oscar award, but it's just like, wow, okay. It's one of those situations where it's like, okay, like she won, and I'm glad she won, but like, you won for that? I mean, Stephanie did way more in that film than Jamie Lee Curtis, despite the cool fight scenes that she had, the great hot dog finger sequence. Those are great, but yeah. Also, I think it's brilliant that that we have a Best Picture winner in which in which you have like weaponized dildos and people fighting over butt plugs is now a Best Picture winner, and it's wonderful. Oh my goodness, it's beautiful. And then Best Actress, a little bit of surprise. It was Michelle Yeoh for Everything All at Once. I was kind of surprised because I was pretty sure like Kate Blanchett had that in the bag just because her performance in Tar was amazing. But hey, I'm impressed that like Michelle Yeoh won, and I'm glad that she won too, because now then Criterion Channel can now promote all the Michelle Yeoh films they just threw on there. So go check out her early work. So yeah, I'm glad. Pretty much all these awards I'm cool with. I mean, I have my issues with like with Brendan Fraser with the Whale. Not with Brendan Fraser, but with like the Whale. I've gone back and forth on that film so much just because there's some troubling aspects of it that I haven't quite like solidified, that I'm not like 100% on that film. But yeah, pretty much everything else you're like Best Original Screenplay, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I was kind of predicting that would win. I was surprised though. Women Talking actually won for Best Adapted Screenplay, which yeah, I was kind of between like Glass Onion and All Quiet on the Western Front was going to win, just because those kind of had went. But I mean, I am glad that like Women Talking won as well, just because like I love the way that it's like just the fact that like it's semi based on true events, and the way that it's staged, where like if you were to not know that this was based on a book, you would look at this film and say, okay, this was a stage play, wasn't it? Because it has the look and feel of like a really good stage play, because most of the film just takes place in a barn. Like that's it. And the dialogue is wonderfully compelling in that film. Best International Feature surprised me a little bit. I was kind of pulling more for Argentina. Argentina 1985, but All Quiet on the Western Front ended up winning, and I think I feel like that might have been like the safer bet. I was just pulling for Argentina 1985 just because that's the best courtroom drama that I've seen in a long time. Like, the best courtroom drama. But All Quiet on the Western Front is still really good as well. I love them both equally, so I'm glad that film won. Best Animated Feature was this was the one year where I was very much uncertain. Like because like there wasn't like a very clear front runner for me in this. Like usually it's easy to tell because whichever one is like the big popular film that families watch a lot with their kids, that tends to be the biggest one. But the thing is, like, that's usually a Disney film that comes out in theaters, and none of the theatrical Disney films were nominated this year. Like Turning Red was only on Disney Plus, which I was pulling for that one to win just because I really love like the tone and the style of Turning Red. But this year was a toss up. It could have been anything. It could have been Marcel the Shell. It could have been Puss in Boots. Like, in fact, I was kind of suspecting that Puss in Boots might actually pull it out. But then Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio won, which was a genuine surprise considering, how dark that film is and how much, Del Toro pushes that, animation is not just for children, it's a medium for all. And I think part of that is due to, excuse me here. And I think part of that is due to just the the Oscar campaign. The campaign for Pinocchio has been high, like higher than like it was. And I think it's just because Netflix put a lot of work into it, and they wanted this film to shine a lot, like way more than like because they also did like the Sea Beast, but they weren't pushing the Sea Beast as much. It's a great film, but they knew that like Pinocchio, it was more towards awards time. They specifically pushed it out so that it could gain awards, and they did a great job with the campaign. So there you go, stop motion film wins. For best documentary, I was a little bit surprised that that Navalny, I'm trying to say Navalny won for best documentary, because I was sure it was between All the Beauty and the Bloodshed and Fire of Love, and that All the Beauty and the Bloodshed would be the winner here. But I think I missed out on the aspect that like I think in terms of like the actual like relevant content for the documentary would play a bigger part, and Navalny definitely plays a heavier role. It's very poignant to watch, especially if you haven't seen it. It's about someone who spoke out against what was going on in Russia and was targeted and imprisoned for coming out about what was going on. And it's a very good documentary. It's just that in terms of like assembling a documentary, I found a lot more in Fire of Love and All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. So yeah, that was what we got there. I did see, while I was catching up on all the best animated short films, I did watch My Year of Dicks, and and I guess it was fun to hear that being said at the Academy Awards. So even if it didn't win, we got him to say it. Best original score was All Quiet on the Western Front. Bit angering because I was pulling for Babylon. If you listen to Justin Hurwitz's score for Babylon, you would probably agree that that's some of the best movie music. No offense to All Quiet on the Western Front, but that one's a little maddening for me. Best original song though, that's Natuna 2 from RRR. There's no questioning that was gonna win, especially when you saw the when they did the live performance of Natuna 2 at the Oscars. That was an amazing moment. You saw the audience just like light up, and I've seen like people have like recorded themselves going to the theater when that scene comes up and the audience just goes wild. There's no way that wouldn't have been winning for best song. A few predictable ones here. Top Gun Maverick wins for best sound, best production design, All Quiet on the Western Front. Best cinematography, All Quiet on the Western Front as well. A little bit surprising because I was kind of pulling more for Elvis, but yeah, it's a good film. Best makeup is The Whale. Troubling thoughts on that. Best costume, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Interesting one. I would kind of more pulling for Babylon or Everything Everywhere All at Once, just because I think there was a lot more like intricacies that had to go into those outfits. But that being said, the costumes and the variety of them in Black Panther were pretty good as well. Best film editing was a lock too. Everything Everywhere All at Once was expertly edited. There was no question that was going to win. And another one no one was going to question. Avatar: The Way of Water wins for best special effects. About what you expect. And he got there were some great speeches throughout the night. Particularly Kukui Kwan, where he, got up there and told his history and cried on there and, showed off like, hey mom, I just won an Oscar. And it was very, very heartfelt. It was very sweet. It was a very, very sweet, low-key Oscar ceremony where I was genuinely excited to see who won. And I was impressed. It was a fun time. Alright. So, quick recap here. Of all their films reviewed today. We reviewed Scream 6, the 6th entry in the Scream saga, and it's much better than Scream 5. Some quality kills, lots of twists, lots of subversion, and I love the hell out of that film. Great movie. We also reviewed John Wick Chapter 4, which is, like I said, this is the perfect quadrilogy, and Chapter 4 seals the deal. Amazing fight scenes, just great choreography and set pieces. It's everything that you want out of a John Wick film and more. It comes out next week. Do not miss it. I reviewed EO, the story of a donkey who learns all about humanity and judges it. Not everyone's cup of tea, but if you like films like Alcazar, Balthazar, this is definitely one you got to check out. And Aqua Teen Hunger Forever Plantasm is sadly not the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie that I was hoping for, mostly because it does not meander as much as it should, and it doesn't really find all that funny stuff to do with its premise. So there you go. There's all our reviews. So you can read my reviews over on movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, or twincitiesgeek.com. As always, I will post the individual reviews later on my YouTube channel. And if you'd like to support the stream, we have a Patreon that you can go to where you can get early clips of some of the stuff I'm working on, as well as some of the books that I'm working on as well. And, I will also... I was hoping they'd have the schedule out by now, but I will be appearing at Anime Detour this year, which is coming up in April. And in fact, let me familiarize myself with all the panels I'm doing this year. Okay, so at this year's Anime Detour in Minneapolis, I will be doing panels on physical media, Gundam, movies, obviously, Saturday morning cartoons, autism and anime, old school anime, gatekeeping and why it's bad, the horrors of anime, that's an annual thing we always do, which is just a weird anime smash cut, and Tales from the Video Store, pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, if you're in the Minneapolis area, you want to stop on by, I'll be there paneling my brains out because I love doing that. I will have more reviews and video essays coming in the future. And in 2 weeks, I believe 2 weeks, I will be back. Actually, might have to make that 3 weeks, just because I want to have a little bit extra time to cover some stuff and get some... So yeah, in 3 weeks, I'll be back with even more reviews. By that time, we'll have reviews of Shazam! Fury of the Gods, the Dungeons and Dragons movie, and of course, the big one that all the gamers are looking forward to, the Super Mario Brothers movie. I will have the review of that. In fact, I'm probably going to have to time that. Like, when's that? Because it's coming on the 5th now, so I think we might do a stream on the 4th. Just because, like, the earliest I'm going to be able to get the screener is, like, on the 3rd, so... So, yeah, we'll be back on April 4th with reviews of Shazam, Dungeons and Dragons, and the Super Mario Brothers movie. So, we'll find out if Illumination can actually make a video game film that isn't as meandering as their other animated films. So, we'll check on that. So, yeah, if you like these early movie reviews, be sure to like and subscribe and all that junk. And I'll be back in a few weeks, and I'll have more videos in between then. So, until next time, have a good one, everybody.